And we're back for another week of Every Day We're Covering. Chris Parks, SJ Munoz with you once again to talk some college football as we get down to the nitty gritty tail end of the season. It's championship week upon us. SJ, not our best week of picks, but we celebrate the highs and we lament the lows sometimes.
Yeah, like we said, we can only do so much, and go off what we see and hope for the best is basically what we're doing now. But like you said, getting it down to the nitty gritty, but still a lot to be decided, and some big games here coming up this week. We'll get into later.
Yeah, we had some games that ended up being kind of ones where maybe a team won, but they didn't win by enough, and that was what kind of
Right.
bit us here this week. So weren't that far off base, but didn't spreads were not kind here to us. So we'll check on all those last week picks here for you in a minute. But one thing was kind of nice, SJ. We got to meet up actually in real life and watch some football together this weekend. That was kind of nice, and the crowds were out to watch some of the big games this weekend. It was a pretty good slate, and it was good to actually get together.
Yeah, it's nice to always get in person and toast a little bit. If you want to call it that. Of course, a couple of things came to light with a few of the establishments that allow you to make these bets, and maybe we can touch on that later as far as the what's allowed and not allowed, that type of thing. Maybe we can get into that later. But yeah, like you said, it was good to get together, and with the holiday season is always a good time to do that. Maybe actually be able to take a day off work, so that was good for a change.
Yeah, no doubt. Well, as we get started, we'll talk about what we're pouring here tonight as well. I'll start because this one's already been on the docket, and you were kind enough to bring one to me here. So I've saved it here for the pod tonight to try it, and I just tried it for the first time here a minute ago, and definitely enjoying the Yingling Hershey's Porter. Very, as you said, very solid beer. It came away with a good choice there to pick up the 12 pack because it's darn good. I'm liking it.
It's kind of one of those that throws you a little bit of a loop, but in a good way. You think it's going to be, a little bit heavier of a pour just because, just obviously by appearance and when you think of a porter, but it's definitely especially smooth for the type of beer that it is. So that's kind of what kind of set it apart for me from the other ones. You mentioned being able to, meet up there over the week in in the Omaha area. And so I happened to be able to get some local beer there. And I got the Nebraska Brewing Company, Give Me Some More. It's a vanilla brown ale. This one, I actually hadn't tried it before. I've had most of their beers, but this is another good one that's kind of like the maybe something you think might be a little off, a little sweet, maybe not something that you can't really take down more than a couple. But this is definitely a really easy drinker and probably one of their better beers, I would say. That according to my palate, I like this as one of the better versions that they make.
Yeah, that's an interesting one. You brought that up to me as we were put together there over the weekend. I'm gonna have to track that one down too and give it a try because that definitely is an interesting sound. You mentioned you're thinking kind of heavier, and especially when you see that Hershey's logo on this
Yeah,
bottle. But man, you're right. It is kind of like almost on the lighter side of a dark beer.
yeah,
It goes down pretty easy. So yeah, I was definitely
yeah. That it
definitely
could be good and
surprised.
bad. Depends on what you got going on the rest of the night. But
That's
it
true.
seriously drinks like a lager to me. Honestly, you can just it does. I mean, don't get me wrong. It's still a little, a little rich when it comes to a
Yeah,
beverage, but it definitely is. It's a smooth, easy drink.
yeah, that's a nice one. Like it. So that's what we're pouring down our gullet here tonight as we get rolling with some picks. We'll talk about, of course, our last week picks, and we'll just get that out of the way because it wasn't, like we said, maybe our best week, but we were pretty close on some of these. Of course, early on in the week, we're trying to have some fun, and it didn't quite pan out for us. Buffalo was laying 6.5. I had them against Eastern Michigan early in the week, and they laid a turd. Eastern Michigan came out and just dominated the game. 24-11 was the final. Eastern Michigan actually won, so that one was way off base. Then in the Egg Bowl on Thanksgiving, Ole Miss ends up winning over Mississippi State, but not by quite enough. It was a 10-point victory, 17-7. They didn't really turn it on until later in the game. It was pretty close till late. But Ole Miss wins it, but we had it at 12.5. And I actually, this is one of those things like we talked about, things changed later in the week. When I played it that day, I actually had it at 10, so I ended up with a push and didn't come out anything with that one. So just depends sometimes if that number changes a little bit on you. Then Ohio was laying 13.5 at Akron, and they turned it all over my picks that day because I had some other other parlays stuck with them, and they didn't play until the second half apparently because they were just came out flat. They were down a good chunk early in the game, and then they came back and did get the win 25-14, but not enough as we needed 13.5. So Bobcats let us down. I guess, once Solich leaves, everything's out the
Yep.
window. Just all goes to crap. So I can't trust them anymore. They bit me a couple times this year. I'm going to stay off of that bandwagon. And then we had the other game coming up on Friday, the day after Thanksgiving, the traditional Iowa-Nebraska contest. Iowa was getting 2.5. That's kind of we went. You went for that reverse psychology play, and almost came true for your squad, but not quite. Late turnover and then a field goal to win it for Iowa, of course. 13-10 is how it played out. We'll talk a little bit more about that game here a little bit later on. We were also looking for an over there. Didn't quite get to that either. 26.5 was the number, and of course with that low scoring game, we're just a bit shy of getting there as well. So kind of half and half on that one. Missouri, Arkansas, over 55. That was no problem. Mizzou wins at 48-14. Nailed that one at 64 total points. Texas took care of business easily over Texas Tech. They were 13.5-point favorites. They won 57-7. Blew the Red Raiders out of the water. And then Oregon State on Saturday. We were looking for, or actually that was on Friday too, excuse me. Looking for overs in that one. And it was just a 31-7 win. Oregon dominated the game. We were kind of expecting that one to be more of a shootout, and it just did not pan out that way. Oregon came ready to play, and that one, of all of them that maybe I guess I was maybe surprised on. I thought that one at least would get closer to that number instead of staying so far away.
Yeah, Oregon did their part at least from the way we're looking at for the point total. Oregon State just didn't feel like coming to play, I suppose, or just Oregon took them out of their game that much. But it's not very often you see especially with the top teams in that conference getting held to 7 points. Either way, it's you're looking at usually at least 20 some points each team minimum. So, but that's the way it goes. Like you said, some weeks you're on the right side of that coin, some weeks you're on the other side. So it is what it is.
Yep, and didn't work out on that one for that time. Then we had went to Saturday in some of the bigger contests we were waiting for. I had Louisville laying 7 against Kentucky. Ended up being a really back and forth close game, and I was a little bit surprised. But Kentucky came back and won it. 38-31, and it was enough to inspire their coach not to leave as well. All the rumors were flying around that Mark Stoops was a done deal to go to Texas A&M. He came out and made a statement after that game saying that he loves where he's at and he's not leaving and staying there at Kentucky. So we lost that one. LSU was laying 10.5 against A&M, and they got it done. It took a little bit of late effort to get it there, but they got it 42-30. So that was one we hit. UNLV let us down big time. That gravy train's over there for the Running Rebs. They were originally, as we had it, 3.5-point favorites. It got down to 1 by the time we were looking at it on Saturday against San Jose State, but they lose. 37-31 was the final. They were down much bigger than that early in the game. They made it a game, but yeah, that one was a little bit tough to take, thinking that was kind of be one of the better ones of the day.
Yeah, that's kind of one of those too, where you go on the history and the trend, and there's essentially a very small percentage chance that they weren't gonna cover the spread. But like when we saw it drop to 1, did make you raise an eyebrow a little bit and say, "Oh, something's up here." It's not. It was started at 3.5 early in the week and all the way down to 1, like you said. So that was maybe one that if I would have played later on in the week, or even just had a little more time that morning, I might have just took a step back there and said, maybe we have to look at the overs or something like that.
Yeah.
But we'd already recorded, so we're gonna go. We're gonna be as truthful as we can and open book here. So, but yeah, that was just a little disappointing. 10-1 against the spread this year. Didn't see that one coming. That was probably the biggest surprise, to me, was that one is of like, confidence level that we had made the picks we made last week.
Yeah. Another one that, of course, surprised everybody as far as how the game played out. Alabama was laying 14.5 in the Iron Bowl against Auburn. Of course, in games like that, things can get a little weird when it's a rivalry game of that magnitude, and especially when Auburn doesn't have much else to play for. They're just kind of, angling to make that game fun. They did, and Alabama came up with a miracle, a 4th down conversion for a touchdown to win the game, 27-24, so obviously didn't cover, but barely survived and kept their playoff hopes alive if they have any at this point as well. Kansas, no problem there. They took care of business. They were laying 6.5 against Cincinnati on the road, and they won it 49-16. So that was another win for us. And then, of course, the game, Ohio State and Michigan. We were both on Ohio State. We thought they had maybe a little bit more offense. They didn't find enough of it. 30-24 ended up being the final. Michigan pulls off the victory. They came up with some big turnovers in that game in order to help seal it. So we were offline there. So whether you played the getting the points, which was probably at 3.5 for most people later in the week, or if you were playing the money line, obviously you came up short there against the Wolverines. So that's how our plays went last week. And of course, now we're going to kind of recap on a couple of those games. We'll start with, of course, the big one, the game Ohio State Michigan. That was the one that we had a chance to watch some of together, and I was impressed with the way that Michigan was able to control some of the tempo of that game at times. And then, of course, coming up with the big turnovers when they need it was kind of just a huge deal in that game, because Ohio State certainly had their chances, and certainly I think could have gotten rolling a little bit earlier than they did in the game. It took them a while to get their footing offensively, and but give credit to Michigan. They made the plays when they needed to.
Yeah, it's not a surprise here, but kind of quarterback play was a big issue in this as well. You got a Maserati on the they're on the edge, but you can't get him the ball. So what good does it really do? Kind of poking some fun there, but I mean at the same time, Harrison's basically an unstoppable type of receiver, as close as it gets in the college game. If you can't get him the ball, what good does it really do for your roster? So that was a little bit the underwhelming with the game plan they had, but at the same time, Michigan, they're where they're at for a reason this season. Haven't been really even been tested much this year. Of course, this game was they had the work cut out for them, and they come up with the win. But it's just something that I honestly expected a higher scoring game from both sides. The game was competitive and it was exciting, and we enjoyed watching it. But it definitely didn't play out the way I've seen it. Beforehand, I thought maybe you get in the end zone a few more times, maybe one team builds a lead and kind of has to hold on, or a team makes a comeback, maybe gets down by 10 early and figures it out in the second half and pulls away for a 2 touchdown win on the other end. So it was a little bit I don't know, it's kind of seeing like this too with the weather. It's always kind of a gray day. Just I don't know, something
Mm-hmm.
about that. Obviously not dismissing the game because it's one of the bigger rivalries in all of college sports, but it just I don't know. There's something about that atmosphere every year. It just kind of seems like it just doesn't have that like pop to it when you see it. It's just like just mentioned the gray and stuff, and just it's a hard hitting football game. Good both good squads usually, but it just doesn't have that like maybe like the excitement or just the charisma. I don't know how you want to say it,
Mm-hmm.
just of other games that especially in a big match a bit into the season type game.
Yeah, it did. It didn't seem to quite. I don't know. I mean, obviously it was a great game, still a good game, but didn't quite seem to live up to the hype that I think we were all hoping for. You expected maybe some more big plays, or just a little bit more of that excitement juices flowing. There was one play that obviously I'm sure will get looked at and talked about by a lot of people. I thought in the moment after they reviewed it, of course, my bias was kind of leaning towards I wanted
Yeah.
Ohio State to win the game, but there was a play in the end zone where the receiver had it first. The defender took it away from him by the time they were done on the ground, and they ended up staying. It was a touchdown, and then let it stand as a touchdown. It was an awfully close play. It sure looked like he had lost control of the ball before he was down on the ground. But it's one of those that it's so close, and sometimes that call on the field makes a big difference in that moment because you don't really have enough to say, yeah, for sure, this is exactly what we're seeing here on the field. And obviously, that was a big turning point. It turned into 7 points for Michigan, and Ohio State could have had the ball back and prevented that from being on the board. And of course, that'd been the difference in the game. But that was one big play that was, I guess, kind of interesting and made it exciting at that point. But other outside of that, yeah, there wasn't a lot of kind of big play or controversial type situations. I didn't think.
It was more like a bad mistake, like especially at the end of the game. Though you just get a first down, the very next player
Mm-hmm.
off your back foot and just chucking it up, and it's first down. There's no need to do that. It was more of let the other team make a mistake to win instead of going out and making a play to win the game. So I guess that's kind of what I was getting at earlier.
Yeah.
It's just it wasn't like oh my god, what an incredible play. It was more like oh they screwed up, we took advantage, we win. So
Yeah.
that's kind of that's again, and that's what you got to do sometimes. Like
Yeah.
understand it just from the aesthetically, it wasn't like I can't believe this game was so incredible. It wasn't even no maybe
Mm-hmm.
not even a top 10 type of matchup even between those two teams in the history of this series.
Yeah. Well, stealing signs pays off. So it worked out for him in the long
I'm
run.
yeah, I'm surprised we didn't see any more tears this week. That
I
was
know.
wasn't as quite as emotional. But
No.
I mean, emotional enough. Don't get me wrong. We saw enough drama, but I mean, they're
Yeah.
gonna have to come up with something else now. I don't know what they're gonna,
Yeah.
what are they gonna? It can't be me against the world anymore because Harbaugh's back, right?
Yeah, it's not
So
for you. It's not for you, Coach Harbaugh anymore. So yeah, we'll see what they end up going with. Interesting though. I mean, the other side of it too. Obviously, that game gets so overblown by those two fan bases. They put so much stock into it that you get the reactions. And I already saw, some former players and stuff calling out Ryan Day, saying, three in a row, it's unacceptable. You get paid $9 million a year. You got to win this game, which I think everybody understands the importance of it, and he even said so after the game. He kind of admitted, yeah, we're really heartbroken we didn't win the game, but if that's what you're going to solely hang your hat on every year with a program that's had the kind of success that they've had, that's just to me that stuff is ridiculous sometimes. And you're going overboard on one matchup. You still had a great season. You're going to go to a great bowl game. Not too much to be overly heartbroken about, I guess.
Well, in theory, they're not. I mean, they could. A lot of things have to happen, but they could still sneak in. Who knows?
Hmm.
Crazier stuff have happened. It's not totally over yet. I did see kind of something along the opposite lines, and this was just one fan or follower of their team or whatever you want to call it was kind of saying like we have a little bit of a ridiculous standards and just kind of holding the fan base accountable. Which I mean I could see that too because there's not a there's not many fan well there's a lot of fan base in the country do a lot of illegal activities to go have a one loss season.
Yeah.
So it's not, I mean, you just got to kind of have a little bit of perspective on it.
Yeah.
We'll probably bring up that often, but I mean you barely lost to probably one of the top two teams in the country now, so it's not you're not that far off. You make a play here or there, get a go to the portal, get a quarterback next year, get somebody in there, and then you're the team that's celebrating this week instead of the other side. So yeah, they're not that far off. And I did, yeah, sometimes I understand because they put a lot of they were on the field, they wore the uniform and all that stuff, but sometimes it gets a little wacky,
Hmm.
especially online with the commentary and the follow up. It's like I mean we get that you were part of the thing, but you don't think Ryan Day wants to win every game he plays Michigan? Of course he does. So
Hmm.
I mean, I mean, it's not. I just don't get what do you want to do different because basically, other than that, they have no complaints all season. Then all of a sudden, he's the
Yeah.
worst coach they've
Yeah.
had in 20 years. So
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and another game that ends up with that kind of reaction as well as we've seen in the past, Alabama Auburn. What a wild finish! They ended up taking a penalty and then had a ball that got lost, and they had to go track it down and fall on it with a big loss towards the end of the game. Fourth and forever, and Milrow throws an absolute dart to the back of the end zone. And when I saw the replay from behind, it was like one of those where there is absolutely no way that he could have known that it was going to play out like that, but he just put it in the spot where he thought it could have a chance to be caught, and it just played. I mean, the receiver played it perfectly. He had a little bit of space to just kind of back up, catch that ball, and that's one heck of a way for Alabama to stay in that conversation at least for the playoff. But man, they almost blew it.
well, then looking at it from the other side too, defensively, it's you don't let anybody get behind you. You double every receiver that's out there, and like it's so for that to even be the possibility is kind of just like one of those wacky things that like the opposite of what we just talked about. How you wait when you make a mistake. Well, they earned that win. I mean, maybe the other team obviously didn't play it. Auburn didn't play it well, but they
Hmm.
still had to make the throw and make the incredible catch because he tiptoed in. He still didn't have a lot of real estate there to work with the receiver. So for him to make the grab and get a foot down too on top of that is was pretty incredible. And with that series we've seen the kick six and things of that sort. So maybe that was more of what I was kind of pointing towards too when I was speaking of Ohio State Michigan. They've had some crazy things happen that you would expect from a 80-year long series or however long these teams have
Hmm.
been playing. That's more that's kind of more what you expect to see rather than a desperation heave on first down that with no receiver even in the area like we saw in Ohio State. So yeah, that was crazy. And I mean Alabama's just kind of they just know how to win, man.
Hmm.
Winners win. So
Yeah. Yeah, and I guess that's another part of why I brought that up the way that it looked. Obviously sometimes. you go with the phrase, you earn your own luck kind of thing. And
Mm.
obviously that's part of what Alabama's done forever is they're good. They work on things, they're good. Saban tried to make some comment that, oh yeah, we work on that every day and in practice. Like,
Yeah,
oh, come on, dude. Like,
exactly. Yeah.
but I guess my point is it's so, these margins are so thin sometimes. It's just once in a while you got to get lucky. And it seems like some of those teams just they find a way to do that more often than not, and that's what happened again there because he just, like I said, put it in a spot where it could be caught, and then the play just unfolded perfectly to where he put that ball, and they get the touchdown. So pretty slim sometimes the way that it goes to fall your way, and it did for them. We'll talk a little bit more about the overall picture here in a little bit too. A couple other games that I did want to touch on. We don't we try not to overhype our teams that we follow much here on the program because we're kind of looking at college football on a whole. But I did think that both of the games that our teams played this weekend were interesting in certain regards, and I just kind of wanted to get a little bit of take from each of us on each of them. But Iowa, Nebraska, one of those games where it never really plays out how everybody outside is expecting it to. It seems like the game gets a little bit different as far as maybe more points are scored than expected, or less, or the way that the game unfolds isn't kind of what side of the ball you thought was going to have the advantage. But this one, I guess, kind of did play out more to what the two teams' strengths are. Obviously, both play better defense than they do offense. Turnovers have been a problem for Nebraska throughout the season. Definitely was what hurt them again in that game against Iowa. They find a way to get the ball back and kick a field goal, and that's been their story all season long. But I thought it was interesting when I saw you make a comment and talk about the game. Sometimes you feel like your team deserves to have that opportunity to continue playing in the postseason, and sometimes you just don't. You didn't make the plays, and you didn't earn that right to go on and play. And unfortunately, that's Nebraska came up a little bit short in that regard.
Yeah, of course. What's made with the assumption, and obviously, I believe it's probably 99.9% true. That, of course, they're trying to win every game they play. Otherwise, you wouldn't be suiting up and going out in the field like that. So I don't. When I make when I was saying about deserving a bowl, of course they had the opportunity to to earn a bowl, but they didn't. The way they played, they definitely didn't earn it. And you had what 4 games down the stretch within a score. Obviously, that's been the history, and I know a lot of people want to bring it up and say there's a curse and all this crap. And I mean, I get that it's there's a history and there's a trend and there's a thing there, but to me, I kind of like how I talked about Alabama, how winners win. Also on the other side of that coin, losers lose. It's it's a learned mentality. Just a characteristic that you can break it, you can change it, but you got to also acknowledge it. I think too, and not just when the situation presents itself, make a play and change that trend. I think there's just a lot of hoping something doesn't go bad rather than going out and trying to do
Mm-hmm.
something to change that. And when you mentioned the turnovers and the mistakes, the problem with it, a lot of it is just unforced. It's
Mm-hmm.
one thing if somebody just makes an incredible play or a big hit, and you can squeeze that ball as tight as you want. Sometimes you get blown up, that
Mm-hmm.
ball's flying, no matter what you do. I mean, a lot of it, for one example, Purdy's just running in the open field. I mean, literally nobody touches him. Maybe a guy closest guy's 3 yards away, and the ball just slips like like slipped on a banana peel or something. Like it was just like incredible, just stuff like that. And I mean, they could have had a lead there late in the game with a makeable field goal. Of course, nothing's a gimme. You still got to make it, but it wasn't like he tried a 55-yarder from with a 30-mile-an-hour wind. It was a makeable kick, and he
Mm-hmm.
had just made a field goal less than a quarter ago. So you just have the opportunity to make the plays. I'm never been a luck guy, and I've not even blame the refs guy in most cases. I understand there's a lot of calls that are blown, and
Mm-hmm.
it sucks when it kind of happens in that big moment because we've talked to that before. But I think there's just, but within 60 minutes, you always just got to kind of, the blame's on you if you can't get the job done, regardless of, any other thing that happened that's out of your control. You have enough control to change that narrative. And hopefully next year they'll, maybe get some younger guys in there, some new guys, and just maybe even some transfers just that can maybe help change that mindset for the team if they want to build on it. But before the season, everyone was kind of leaning on that. Well, he's only, Rules only won 1 or 2 games in his first year at schools when he did the transformation. I mean, they hit 5. Of course, you wanted to make that bowl. You were so close to getting 6, but he's, more than doubled his usual first year number of wins. So if you want to look at a positive, that there's that to lean on too.
Yeah, certainly. It's always tough when it's a first year for a guy. You just don't know how things are going to play and how guys react. And there's so many factors that go into kind of building your program and what you want to do out there in the field. And everybody has to get used to it. So, but yeah, I thought it was an interesting game. And certainly, yeah, both teams had their chances. And Iowa, lucks out a little bit again and gets that chance. But yeah, the kind of same story on their side. They've just found ways, whatever it may be. They keep finding ways to beat teams. Yeah, it hasn't been pretty. They haven't won, big in any of them, but they continue to give themselves opportunities. There's certainly an interesting end to that season. Going to be interesting to me what happens after the season is over there in Iowa City because we know the Brian Ferentz situation that they've already said he's gone. But I've got this little inkling that his dad's gonna maybe go with him. He can stay as long as he wants. That's the scenario there, and he's built that program. But boy, the kind of some of the couple comments that he's let leak. Usually he's a pretty tight-lipped guy, but he said a couple of things here and there that have kind of got me wondering if maybe he's just going to say, well, this has been a good run. No, let's go ahead and end it now. But we'll see. We'll see how that plays out. Obviously, they've got a big task ahead of them coming up now in their championship contest.
Yeah, I
Um,
even made the comment to you where I thought that if had they lost that game, he might have been, probably would have been, formed or, kind of characterized as a retirement. But I would not have been surprised if, of course, he was going to coach the conference championship and then the bowl game. But I wouldn't have been surprised if he would have, announcement would have came out even Saturday or Sunday. But having won, of course, you're not gonna. That's not gonna come out now. But I'm with you there. I still think there's something just so for somebody that doesn't say too much, he's pretty much throwing about as much of a jab as he's going to throw because he's just in general he's just a bland individual, which that's fine,
mhm.
whatever. You be who you got to be. Just stop chewing gum, please. But I guess that's not that's been there. It's just still I still can't look at him when they show him chewing gum, but maybe that's just me. But yeah, I'm with you there. I think probably something's going to happen. Whether maybe he on his own volition or he's just kind of had enough is
Yeah,
obviously maximized what he can do there. I think it's been proven over time. So,
yeah. Well, yeah, and in dealing with all that talk all the time, probably has to lean on you a little bit after a while too. Probably gets pretty old, but
well, no
um,
more Big Ten West either. That's got to
that's true.
factor in. So,
Rest in peace, Big Ten West. It was fun for somebody. The other game I want to touch on, the team that I follow, Iowa State, played in a late game on Saturday night. Turned out to be in a snowstorm, as there was lots of snow on the field in Manhattan, Kansas, for what they have now affectionately dubbed the Farmageddon game between the two state ag schools in Iowa State and Kansas State. Always seems like this game has turned into a really fun game. Like the games that they've played over the last decade have all been pretty solid, closely contested contests. The game last night was just wacky. Like I don't know some of the numbers that were like on the board after the game was over was just incredible because for Iowa State it was nothing but big plays, and you just don't see that very often, and especially you don't see that in a game where the conditions are like that. Now, maybe it favored the offense a little bit too because it can be sometimes okay to still run, but sometimes still very tough to tackle. So that turned into be the case for Kansas State. I was, I guess, impressed with the way that they kind of handled it throughout because Kansas State kind of kept coming back, but they kept finding a way to get that next big play and that next score. And for Matt Campbell, a guy that was sitting what some fans determined on the hot seat early in the season to certainly turn things around and winning 7 games after everything that went on for him in the offseason has to feel pretty good for him. I would definitely think.
yeah, that was one of those games that just kind of couldn't believe it, even when you were watching it. Just the plays. I'm not saying it was like. I mean, obviously, this back and forth depends on if you're rooting interest, but at the same time, it's just like you can't really turn away, even if you don't care who wins. It's just like one of those like this the crazy, it's just the craziest crap that kept happening. You're like, what is it's almost like a video game type. Even and then in the weather, like you mentioned, big. You see a lot of 70-yard touchdown passes when it's 3 inches of snow on the field. So that was pretty incredible. But just I think early on, kind of keeping it close for Iowa State allowed them to make the big plays when they need later on. But I think it was big just to hold them to those field goals early because it could have very easily got away from them
Hmm.
because early on K State definitely had the momentum. At least it felt like, and they didn't take advantage of the time to build a lead, and Iowa State made them pay for it.
Yeah. At one point in the game, Iowa State had one player with 197 rushing yards because Abu Sama ran the first one back like 70 yards for a touchdown on the first play of the game. They had 197 rushing yards from him and 191 yards of total offense. So they actually had negative yards the rest of the team at that point in the game. They ended up averaging 15 yards per play prior to the kneels at the end of the game. They ran 35 plays. Kansas State ran 102. 102 to 35 plays. And of course, 4 or 5 of those were at the end of the game when they're just trying to kneel the clock out. So it's like unbelievable. I think
Even
the
for a big, like an offensive type league, 100 plays is unheard of.
yeah
I'd be interested to see and go through and just, you know, pick your Texas Tech or your, your air raid type offenses just in the history, last 5, 10 years, and see how many times 100 snaps have been in a game. It's got to be. I mean, I couldn't imagine more than a dozen or so. That's an incredible amount of plays.
Yeah. Well, and you think about that from a defensive player's perspective.
Hmm.
Yeah, it's great your offense is out there killing these 70-yard touchdowns, but you got to go right back out there. You're playing 102 snaps. I give them a lot of credit, and the defense ended up making plays at the end of the game when they needed them to get a couple late stops to win it. And then Sama, the freshman running back, ended up with 276 yards and 3 touchdowns. Just incredible effort. So I just kind of wanted to give them a little bit of a shout out the way that game played out. And it was just it was odd. You don't see that very often in college football with a play disparity like that. Just really, really incredible. So that's how the games kind of went here this past weekend. A lot of them that we were paying attention to. Of course, we already talked most of the big ones here, and now that sets up the championship week here for us. So how we're going to do this is we're going to play on through and just kind of go through all the championship games. I think that's kind of what we've got planned for you for the postseason, anyways, because once we get to bowl season, we plan on doing that from week to week and picking all the games. Now, whether or not we're always going to agree, that might be interesting, and whether or not we're going to be very good at the end of the day with the win-loss column, we'll find out. But hopefully, we're going to be better than others. The way we'll do this too is we'll kind of tell you if there were some that we were kind of this was going to be our play anyways, because obviously we probably weren't going to wager on all these games, normally. But if there's one that we were kind of feeling good about or we were looking at, we'll let you know that if we kind of had this one pegged as something that we were really, really looking at. So we'll start off with Friday, and there's 2 championship games on Friday. We'll go with the less attractive of the 2 here first. Conference USA, New Mexico State, surprising, is a team who traditionally has had a rough go of it. They've gotten better these last like 4 or 5 years. They've been to, I think it's 3 straight bowl games. They really kind of turned that program around. But they're at Liberty in that Conference USA championship game. Liberty's a 10.5 point favorite. I did look up the regular season game was a 33-17 victory by Liberty. So this is a rematch. So interesting. I'm going to go ahead and say that the home team is going to be able to cover that 10.5. They would have the last time they played. It might be tough to do that again, but at home that helps. So I think I'm gonna go with Liberty in that game.
I like Liberty as well, but I'm not as confident as you. So I'm just thinking, outright, just take the money line on that
Mm-hmm.
one. So being as that you're not going to get some amazing odds on that. Also, keep an eye on the totals. Right now it's 54. I actually like the under. Just
Mm-hmm.
that last game was a little bit higher scoring than typical of either of these teams, especially within conference play this season. So money line for sure on Liberty. But if you actually want to maybe earn a little money or earn a little bit on your bet there, I'd say watch that under. And if it moves any more lower, any down on that, don't mess with it. But if it stays around 54, I like the unders there.
Yeah, that's a good play, I think there. We move on to the other game that's on Friday, and this this may be one of the more exciting championship games that we have all weekend long. It certainly was a great game the first time they played. We expect nothing less again. This one will be in Vegas at Allegiant Stadium for the Pac-12 championship. Of course, the final hurrah for the Pac-12 as both these teams move on to the Big Ten here this next season. But Oregon right now, as I saw it, was a 9.5 point favorite in this game. The number I saw for the over/under was 67.5. It got to 69 last time they played. Washington won it 36-33, and of course that wild game that we talked about and recapped earlier this season on the program. But boy, that's I don't know. Seeing that, I mean, Oregon's playing well, but that number's high. I was shocked to see that 9.5.
Yeah, same here. I'm kind of my play, honestly, I'd like Washington to cover that points, and I earlier was 9. I'll take that hook too. So definitely take the 9.5. It's probably a 50-50 type thing
Yeah.
for me. I wouldn't not super confident, but I expect Oregon to win. I just think, like you said, that's a lot of points. Almost two scores there.
Hmm.
I don't know if that's a seems a little bit high, especially considering you're taking out any of the elements in the game as well, being inside. Also, a different type of venue. Like I know they had UNLV's played a few games there this season. Of course, Raiders and Chiefs just played what a couple hours ago they got done. So
Hmm.
you got to watch that turf too. I know that kind of comes up a lot, especially with the type of stadiums that switch off and on. Because I know UNLV did play on an artificial type surface, while the Raiders use a grass. I mean,
Oh,
obviously it's
okay.
rolled in. And you know how they do this. All that high tech type stuff. I'm not much of a green thumb here. Just call the grass pad anytime I need help. But other, but I know UNLV is using our field turf type thing, so I would imagine it's possible that being a college game, they might use the same type of surface that they use. So
Hmm.
just something extra to watch there. I just I think not, basically bottom line 9.5. That's just too much.
Yeah, I agree. I'm going to go Washington to keep it at least close. And especially just the nature of the way that game played out before and the nature of Oregon to be so risk, they like to take that risk all the time, so they sometimes leave some points out there. You would expect Washington to be able to keep this interesting. And I mean, I think this is going to be another fun shootout. But boy, do they get to that number again? I'd keep an eye on saying low. I mean, that's a lot of points to get to, and I would say that they, kind of like we saw both those teams here this last week. Those games ended up being lower scoring than we kind of thought. So I would probably look at that under there too, with that high number there at 67.5.
Yeah, I think if one team gets to 30, the other team's probably 14 tops. It'd be more of a blowout type of game. I
Mm-hmm.
mean, I assume it'd be more of a 24-21 type finish. But if one team hits 30, it's going to be similar to maybe Oregon's victory last week of 31-7 or 31-10, 31-14. I don't see a back and forth shootout like the first game.
Yeah. So then we move on to Saturday, and we go to the MAC Championship. Is one of the first ones I had on my schedule here. Miami of Ohio is taking on Toledo. This will be played in Detroit at Ford Field. Toledo laying 8 the last I saw it. 45.5 was the over/under number, and this was a regular season game as well, rematch that was a 21-17 win, I believe, is what I've got down for Toledo the first time around. So it was a fairly competitive contest. This will be interesting. Toledo has seemed to have gotten better as the season has moved along. And Miami of Ohio has been kind of hit or miss. It seems like one week they're competing pretty well, the next week maybe they're not. I think this favors the Rockets here a little bit. I don't know. I don't love the 8. I hope by the end of the week maybe, or by as it gets closer, it comes down a little bit. But I'd still be willing to maybe be a little risk averse and go after that 8, even if it stays there. I kind of lean towards the Rockets here. How about you?
Yeah, we happen to agree again. So far, we're not much dissension in the ranks. I'm with just that, and especially being a conference championship. I don't see winning by that much. And of course, Toledo hasn't lost since what week 1, so that obviously going to lean heavily on them to win it. I just don't. They really haven't had like a ton of I mean a few blowouts here and there, but I mean a 1 point win 2 weeks ago. Of course, you mentioned that 4 point win. The one by what 7 here. It's Ball State earlier. So I mean they're getting it done, but it's not like they're just
Hmm.
they're not totally embarrassing people week in and week out. Of course, you get a couple blowouts here and there within that league naturally, but yeah, it's just same thing like we said in the previous game. It's too big of a number, especially in a conference championship.
That'll be one to watch. I would guess we're kind of, I think, both on the same wavelength here that we'd probably go money line right now. If that number comes down, then maybe test it there with the
Or
Rockets.
if it goes up, I might jump on
Well, true,
Miami to
yeah,
cover that if it jumps up to 9 or 10. So yeah, but definitely we're speaking the same language here. Just
no doubt. Big 12 championship, Arlington, Texas. Boy, well, this is one I didn't talk about in the games of the recap, but boy, Oklahoma State almost absolutely blew and pissed away their chance to play in the title game because they were down big early in the game to BYU, came back, ended up having to go to overtime, ended up going to double overtime by the time they got it done, in a pretty awkward way for a game to end, too, because there was a receiver for BYU that made a catch, defensive back comes up, strips it out of his hands, takes it away for the turnover, and that's how the game ended. And Okie State gets to go to the title game. So wild way for Mr. Gundy to get there. Texas is rolling right now. They were playing really well. They've got them right now laying 14. And boy, this is just such a weird game to think about because Okie State has been just so unpredictable this year. When they play well and they stick to their game, they're a really solid football team. Ollie Gordon is a great running back, but they have the propensity on that defensive side. If things get away from them, they get away big. I mean, you saw that game a couple weeks ago against Central Florida where they just absolutely got stomped. It's odd. I don't like that it's that big of a number, but boy, I feel like they're going to take some chances probably if they get down in the game late, and I think Texas is going to be able to cover that number. I hate to say it, but I think they're going to be able to cover the 14. That's how I'm feeling at least. How about you?
Yeah, I think I'm just a little leery after last week with those bigger numbers and being very confident. I kind of just gonna have to go the other way just to, and of
Yeah.
course it's gonna happen this week. But that's go. So for me, the safer way to go, or I guess smarter if I want to make myself sound better. I think the over 55 is gonna hit, even
Okay.
if it's a blowout. Texas hit 55 by themselves last week.
That's true.
Non-predictability that you mentioned, I would not be surprised to see Oklahoma pull this one out just because that they've either been amazing or just like last week, almost blew it all. So of course, I think Texas will still win, but it wouldn't like 100% shock me if they end up falling apart. But just the play here for me is just going to be that over 55. Seems like that'd be that's something I'm going to play for sure, and that's definitely one of my more confident picks this week. So well, we'll see how that goes. Doesn't mean a lot these days.
I'm with you. I would feel more confident about that. I do like that going with the over in that game. If you're gonna make me pick on the spread, I'm gonna just go ahead and go with Texas, even though, like I said, I'm not overly confident about it just because I don't know what Okie State team we're going to get. I hope it's a fun game. I'd rather watch one that's entertaining than not, but I've just got this feeling that Texas is going to get it done, and of course then the arguments start after that as well. We'll talk more about that. Mountain West Conference, this is also in Vegas, so that Allegiant Stadium's getting busy here these last couple of weeks. The Boise State taking on UNLV in the Mountain West Championship. These teams have not played yet this season. Of course, UNLV let us down here this last week. And I didn't write down. Do you have that number in front of you, SJ? I didn't write down that number.
Right now, Boise's getting they're 3-point favorite as of this evening. So
Okay.
I guess it might be a chance for UNLV to redeem themselves. Kind of hard to very confident in them going after last week, but that 3 points. I mean, they might be able to do some damage there, but I don't know, man. But I'm gonna be looking at that total here instead of the spreads. I don't like that 2 weeks in a row. I don't want somebody to come up and bite me twice. Um,
Yeah, 58.5 is what I'm seeing right now for the total. Um, it's kind of a vanilla
yeah, I know that
number.
might
I
even
don't
be
know.
an under there too
Yeah.
because Boise likes to play defense. So but I mean, UNLV's gonna come out and shock you. If I mean, this is obviously can kind of tell by the breakdown here. Not exactly. I'm not on the UNLV bandwagon as much as I was maybe even just a week ago. But I think they can cover that three. So it'd be very low confidence. But I'll take them. I'll take them +3. That might even hop up later this week because we saw some pretty big movement with that. Obviously 2 points doesn't sound a lot, but when it comes to this world, that's a pretty decent movement on a line, especially late in the week like that.
Yeah. Well, I'm bitter, so I'm going the other way. I think Boise State covers the three, and the thing that gets me about this too, and especially about UNLV, and I've been impressed with the way that they've been able to run through the season like they have. They haven't had this moment. They haven't been have this experience. Boise State's been there. They've played all kinds of big games. That program is used to playing in championship contests. The stage is not going to be anything that they're too pressured about. Whereas UNLV, You haven't been there before. I'm sure everybody's a little extra hype. It's in your own town, so that adds a little bit of extra pressure on your back. I don't know. I like Boise's spot there to be a little bit more confident with them. But yeah, that's a tough game to call for sure. As we move on to the SEC championship, the game that we all kind of were hoping we were going to get, and it's going to be Georgia and Bama. And now here's either Bama's opportunity to say that we're in the conversation and we should be in the playoff, or Georgia to get it done and have their chance for their three-peat to still stay alive. Right now, I've got them as Georgia as a 5-point favorite in this game. The number at 55.5. What's so weird about this, and of course, this always happens with those rivalry games at the end of the season. It gets you all kind of thinking goofy. But do you throw that game out last week, Alabama? I mean, it is against Auburn. I mean, they were rolling before that. Everybody was on their bandwagon for a while there before that game happened. But at the same time, I've been so impressed with Georgia and the way they played. I was a little disappointed they didn't play a little bit better this last weekend against Georgia Tech. I think they were just kind of maybe cruising through that one a little bit. But boy, when Georgia's firing on all cylinders and they play well, I, I think they get it done. That five, and I think it will be kind of a touchdown one way or another who wins this game. So I would be okay with rolling with that five there for the dogs. I'm sure Bama's going to make this interesting because that's what they do, but I just think Georgia's too good of a team.
Seems weird to say this, but I actually like Alabama in the upset. But
Yeah,
we don't see that very often. I'm gonna go ahead and just take them to win outright. Might be a little bit of a recency, just the way they played and how they kind of made that comeback. But I do think the quarterback's gonna make a big play here or there. And I think they have better quarterback play now. Earlier in the season, when we talked about them losing to Texas, that was a little bit iffy, but seems like he's found his groove,
hmm
somehow, some way. And maybe I just want to pick an upset and get something right. That could be part of it too. But I do think Alabama can get it done here. And we we mentioned a few weeks back how Georgia's kind of been an under the radar type of powerhouse type of program, which was kind of strange. And I think maybe that maybe there hasn't been a test out there, something that really get them going. Or I mean, how many big games have they played in this year? I don't know. I don't know if
that's
they
true.
played in one. So so maybe they're not as tested with this team, but Alabama obviously is, and they've been in some battles this season, even against Texas and last week too. So I think Alabama can get it done with the upset. And right now, plus 180 in certain areas, or about 200. So you can make a little decent money on that as
Yeah.
well.
Yeah, I don't hate it. I think you could be right, but I don't know. I just think Georgia's too good, but that'll be a fun game for sure. I think it's going to be a pretty wild one. The American Athletic Conference, SMU is at Tulane. Right now, Tulane a 4-point favorite. Those teams did not meet in the regular season. I don't know. This is an interesting one. I think Tulane's been pretty good at times. SMU has gotten better. I think as the season has moved along, they've seemed to win some games in better fashion as it's come down the stretch. Boy, I don't know. I'm really torn on this one because Tulane being at home helps a lot. I think they're being in New Orleans, and they have played some big games here these last couple of seasons. Man, I don't know. I do think that no, maybe I should go this route since I'm so uncertain on the game itself. I kind of think the over is the way to go here. It's at 50.5 is what I've got, and I think these teams both put up pretty good points when they get going. So that's maybe what I would stick with just to kind of save myself from the actual prediction here in this one.
Yeah, I expect some points to be scored as well. I am gonna not not nothing major confidence, but I'm just gonna roll with Tulane just based on the consistency they've had this season. Nothing more than that is, and I mean, you said being closer to home there doesn't hurt either, but just the they've done it week in and week out this year, and wouldn't wouldn't be surprised either way. But just playing the trends and playing the recent history, I'm gonna go ahead and think Tulane's gonna get it done. 4 points. That's nothing. That doesn't bother me at all. The 4 points. I could see either team winning, but I don't think the spread's too big one way or the other.
Yeah. All right, we go to the Sun Belt. App State at Troy. 6.5-point favorites for Troy. These teams also did not meet during the regular season. The over/under number right now 51.5. So right now Troy about a touchdown favorite. Of course, App State's been a darling of a lot of folks for a long time. Of course, ever since that big upset over Michigan got their name on the map. But they've played and been a really solid program. And of course, so is Troy. They're kind of also one of those teams that has been known to win some big games here and there. I think Troy actually has been a little bit more consistent as the season has gone along. They've flied under the radar a little bit more. I think App State's going to get the attention because of some of the games that they've recently played and had the national exposure. But I would lean towards Troy winning this one. I think they get that done winning it by a touchdown.
Totally with you on that one. Definitely going to cover that. I think rather easily. It might end up even being a double digit type of win. One thing I wanted to touch on though is something we're going to have to get used to, and you kind of go back and obviously one of the things that anybody's going to look at when it comes to whether you're gambling or just making a projection or even just a preview type of story for head to head matchups. Obviously, the first thing you go to, and three or four of these games we've already talked about, they haven't even played yet this season,
Mm-hmm.
but with the expansion and the shifting of conferences, that's going to be more of the norm as
Mm-hmm.
we go down the road here. So that's just it seemed kind of funny to me when I was looking it up. I was like, man, he can't really obviously there's other things we look at and stuff too, but it's just kind of another thing to have to kind of work around. There is not having a head-to-head matchup to go off of or anything to compare on, or even
Mm-hmm.
just watching an old game, go back and watch the first time they played, or at least catch some highlights or something and kind of see how it played out. That's going to be less of an option as we move forward here with this new college football landscape.
Yeah, that's a very good point. And the one that was so odd to me because I obviously watched the conference so much because of the team I follow is in it, but with the Big 12, you don't see. I mean, that hasn't been the case for so long because every team's played everybody, and now with the addition of those other teams coming in, that didn't happen this time. Okie State, Texas didn't play, so interesting, very interesting, and maybe it makes some of those games now in the postseason, the conference championship games, a little bit more intriguing, I suppose. If there was a matchup in the regular season and it was a blowout, then obviously that doesn't give much allure to the title game the next time around. So, but yeah, it'd be interesting to see how that continues to kind of trend and what results we get in these title games without that previous matchup. The ACC championship is played in Charlotte. Louisville taking on Florida State. Florida State right now a 3.5 point favorite. 51.5 is the number. Uh, Florida State found a way to get it done last week. Took down Florida. That was one that you maybe thought, are they going to get bit here? Because of course Jordan Travis went down with that injury. You change quarterbacks out. It's a rivalry game, so does Florida jump up and get you? They found a way to get the win. This game's going to be weird. I don't know. One of these games has to go sideways because that's what's going to make the argument interesting for for the final four. We know that's going to happen. Um, I've got this, even though Louisville kind of laid an egg here this last week, I've just got this strange feeling that they're going to be the one that upsets the apple cart here. I think they're going to jump up and bite Florida State here. You lose such a star player like that you rely on. Does it eventually catch up with you? I don't know. I think Louisville pulls one out of their rear here, so I kind of like going with them as the upset this week.
Yeah, I like another mild upset as well, kind of similar to the Alabama game. I know they didn't look so great last week, but at the same time, it's kind of it's an in-state rival game.
Hmm.
You can kind of anything can happen in those, and honestly, I think Louisville is just looking ahead a little bit with what that obviously you want to come into the conference championship game off a win, but it wasn't an in-conference game,
Yeah, it didn't
so it's
matter.
not
Yeah.
like it didn't in the big picture. It didn't really affect you, so you're kind of worried about what's happening next week. Of course, they didn't plan on losing and didn't want to lose,
Hmm.
but I mean they're still in the same situation they would have been in either way. So I think they get it done, and wouldn't be surprised to see a 10 point 2 touchdown type of win. Florida
Hmm.
State kind of you know got through that game on with band-aids and duct tape. They they look like they were out of it for most of it, and they got it done. But I don't think they're going to do it again this week,
Hmm.
especially if our boy Jack Harlow's back in the house. They got no chance then. So if he shows up, I'm gonna go. I'm just gonna drive out and be ready to catch my ticket once that final buzzer sounds.
There you go. He's going to have that great halftime set ready to roll out and impress everybody. Uh, Louisville, I'm seeing plus 145 right now on the money line, so keep an eye on that too. Yeah, maybe a chance to score some good cash there with that upset. And then we go to the Big Ten championship. Indianapolis, Michigan, of course, off their impressive win over Ohio State. They now get to take on those mighty Iowa Hawkeyes that find a way to win games by 3. This number is impressive. I saw this and I was like, oh man, that's a shot in the nuts. 23-point favorites for the Michigan Wolverines. 35.5 is the over/under number. Uh, that's such a big number, but
Yeah.
man, I really do not think Iowa has much of a chance at all in this game to stay competitive. We saw what happened when they played Penn State earlier this year. They got their doors blown off then. They've lost good players since then. Their best player is out, with Cooper DeJean being out here these last couple of weeks with the injury. Um, I I would say that Michigan is going to win by a few scores, whether or not they cover 23. I could see one of those weird backdoor kind of screw you over type of things in this game, maybe where Iowa gets a late field goal or two or something to get back close enough. But I would more so maybe look at that number. I think Michigan's going to be able to put up enough points to push that over that 35 and a half. That'd probably be maybe where the play should go here.
Yep, same. Right there with you. It's just I could see them blowing it out, but even if they do blow them out, you're safe betting that cover and just a smarter play. I mean, we talked about big numbers. That's just insane. You'd have to go back and look to probably find a I guess maybe Northwestern a few years ago might have been a pretty big dog in that conference championship game, but even still, like that's just you would think it's kind of insulting. At the same time, it wasn't like why wouldn't they be that big of a
Yeah.
favorite?
Hmm.
With the kind of offense that Iowa has and what they've done this year. So yeah, no way Michigan's going to lose this game. But it's really hard to pull the trigger on that big of a number. So let's
Yeah.
just go ahead and do the smart play, and maybe we'll sprinkle something on that if it comes down here later in the week. Maybe get down to 20. I'd feel a little bit better. 19, something like that.
Yeah. Yeah. No doubt. Yeah, it'll be interesting to see if it does trend a little bit lower. I think maybe it will, just because people are going to be a little bit scared of that. But Iowa certainly can play defense. I don't doubt that maybe they can put together a couple early maybe stops and make people start to think just a little bit. But once Michigan gets the ball rolling, it's not going to be tough for them to win that game. So that's our run through here for championship week here for you. Should be a lot of fun to watch some of these games. With definitely a few on my list that I try to be locked in as much as I can to watching them. Of course, we're going to try to take in as much as we can because we got to savor it while we have the opportunity. We get through this championship week, and then you got that little bit of a lull before we start working into these bowl games. So it'll be a little bit kind of few and far between there for probably a couple of weeks, but then. Of course, once you get heavy into bowl season, then you get them all piling on top of each other. So it'll be a lot of fun to watch. And this is the time of year everybody, I guess, you look forward to. You don't want it to end, but you want to see these great games at the end of the season too.
Yeah, it's kind of like you feel like you just started, and then you're like can't wait for the game to start, and kind of buzzing through the season, and before you know it's over. But with still plenty of things to be decided on the field, and like you said, we'll have a nice little smorgasbord of picks here as the Bulls get going. Kind of like you said, we probably won't actually make play on every game, but we're gonna go ahead and make a pick on that. So you can decide if you want to go ahead and make that play or not. It'll still give us a reason to watch, and we're gonna watch anyway, so we might as well have some extra fun with it there. And who knows, maybe buy a couple extra Christmas presents there with our winnings.
Yeah, no doubt. Got to afford all these damn kids need all kinds of stuff. I got to get some wins here. I was impressed though here. Not too much. We're not going to have too much in show arguments. We actually agreed on most of the
Yeah,
games. I'm
no,
pretty
that's how we,
impressed.
yeah, I don't know if that's a good thing or a bad thing though. That's so we'll find
That's true.
out. You would think, but yeah,
At
you would
least
think it'd be probably good, but I don't know. After last week, and I'm still a little bit. That was just kind of my thing. I wasn't as risky this week. I don't know. I just felt like
yeah,
kind of kind of got blindsided last week.
yeah. Look at my wounds a little bit. Yeah,
Yeah.
no doubt. Well, we appreciate you tuning in here once again. Again, we would love it if you would share the word, spread the show out to some others you think might enjoy and love college football. You can find us on Spotify platform. If you look around on Amazon, Google Podcasts, you can find it there as well if that's what somebody prefers. Follow us on Twitter. The handles are at Cherokee CP, at SJM Bets. We put out some different stuff through for you throughout the week. SJ does a great job putting out that graphic for you as well, so you can kind of follow along with what we've been doing with picks. And then, of course, you can interact with us there. We'd love that. Interact with the show. There's a poll always each week on the program as well, and you can make comments right directly on there if you're listening through Spotify as well. So we appreciate everybody's support. Have some fun. Enjoy championship week. That's SJ Munoz. I'm Chris Parks. Thanks for joining us for another week of Every Day We're Covering. We'll see you next week for some more covers.